welcome Pastor as he comes to bring the word.
Well, do things a little different. I'm not going to preach a sermon to you today. I'm going to tell you a story. I'm a storyteller. I love to tell stories. The year was 1965. Young couple, not too long out of the military, had 2 children, boy and a girl. One was 5, the other one was 3. I was working as a welder, making good money for the time. I mean, this starting pay was $1.25 an hour. I was making about $3.76, as I recall, as a welder. We were living quite well, doing well, saving money, buying anything we wanted to buy, and then God shows up and messes everything up. He called me to preach. God's made few mistakes. That had to be one of them. And I was convinced that God made a mistake. I went and talked to a friend of mine that I had great respect for. His name was Dub Fussell. He pastored a church, country church in Louisiana. I had known him a long time. And I went to talk to him to get some counsel, and I said, I really feel God has called me to preach. And his answer was classic. He was brilliant, highly educated, Bible scholar. And he had my respect. He said, well, finally, you realize what all the rest of us have known all along. I said, well, I feel like God's messing up my life. He said, well, wait, it'll get worse. I said, you're a real encouragement. Anyway, I'd preached a few times. I remember the title of the first sermon I ever preached. It was called This Is That. From Acts 2, This Is That. Joe's daddy was a butcher. And he bought a country store in a little small place called South Oak Grove, Louisiana. He wanted to have his own store. He had a little country store where he sold fresh meat because he was a butcher. Well, we wanted to go down and see what he had bought. And right beside his store was a one-room country church. I mean, it was just one room. No Sunday school rooms, no restrooms, no nothing. It was just a one-room country church. We went over it and looked at it. Door was open. Nobody locked doors in those days. They didn't lock the church doors. We looked inside, and it had wooden benches, homemade wooden benches, and a homemade altar. It was run down, curtains on the windows were torn. And we got to checking around, but nobody was having church. We found out who had information about the church. And it was a couple named Hatcher. I cannot remember her name, but his name was Tom. Tom Hatcher and his wife, she was the secretary. And we asked if anybody was having church, and she said no. I said, well, we'd like to have church there on Sundays. I didn't know anything about pastoring a church. Anyway, we started having church on Sundays. And I knew one thing, that I didn't know enough So I enrolled in college. Now, I was still working as a welder, but I enrolled in college for the fall semester. This was in the spring. Pastored the church that summer and worked on the job. In fact, we bought a 10 by 50 foot trailer and moved it down there so we could live on the premises of the church, be among the people. And I quit my job. And started to college. Now, I went to school on the GI Bill. Young people, you want to go to college, don't run up a big college debt. I never ran up a college debt. Nothing else, you can't do it any other way, go in the military. Amen. Let the GI Bill pay your college. Anyway, we had used up what money we had, and things were getting pretty slim, and that's when Joe learned how to shop. She is always one more classy lady. She never buys anything new. I can't remember the last time she went to buy something new out of a dress store or something. But she'll come in every once in a while. She's been to a resale or a shop, and she come in and she says, look at the label on this. This is a $300 dress. I said, what did you pay? She said, $8. But that's why she always looks so classy. Anyway, things were getting pretty slim. We were out of money. We were just barely getting by. Parrish, our oldest son, 5 years old, and he wanted a bicycle for Christmas. Well, I didn't see any way we could afford a bicycle, but I started doing without lunch, going to school, saving what pennies I could save. And by Christmas time, I had saved $5. I went down to the Goodwill store. They had a bicycle, but it was $7. I left pretty well discouraged. I was driving an old Corvair Chevrolet that Joe and I ran good once you got it started, got good gas mileage, but we had to push it to get it started every morning. It just wouldn't start. Once it got it started, it was fine. Driving that old car, and I had one suit and one sport coat. And they had both been given to me by Joe's sister's husband, J.M. I had one pair of shoes and they had holes in the bottom. And now then, I could not even buy my son a bicycle for Christmas. And I went out to that little church and I knelt down at the altar that Joe had painted herself, painted that altar. And I had a pity party. And I was informing God. I've got one suit, one sport coat, a pair of shoes that's got holes in the bottom. I can't buy my wife anything for Christmas. I can't even buy a $7 bicycle for my son. And I was crying. I had my hands over my face. I'll never forget hot tears running through my fingers and dripping down on the altar. And I went through this pity party for a while. And I made up my mind I was going to quit ministry. I checked in a metal box, steel box that I had made to keep my welding equipment in. I went and checked it. And I had all my welding equipment there, and as soon as the first of the year, I was going to go back to welding. I could have gotten a job anywhere. I was a classified, certified welder. I could read the x-rays, I repaired, I could do it all. I did it all. I decided I was going to go back to welding. I was going to quit the ministry. And I said, I will never preach again. And God spoke to me and said, you will do what I tell you to do. I said, no. I went back out to the church and knelt down at that same altar. And this time I said, God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that I was going to quit. I said, if I never have but one suit and one sport coat, if I have to put cardboard in my shoes and walk to preach your gospel, I will preach it. Whether you help me or not, I'm going to do the best I can. Well, Christmas Eve came, and I read this kid's Parrish and Melody Christmas story out of Luke 2. Went to tuck them into bed, and they got down on their knees as they did every night, and Parrish would pray. God bless Mama. God bless Daddy. God bless Melody and God. I sure would like to have a bicycle for Christmas. I knew it wasn't going to happen. There I was in this dilemma again. Do I keep my commitment to God? Or do I go back welding? We were up a little late because Jo, being as frugal as she has always been, and you know, she never complained all of that time. I never heard her complain one word. Anyway, she had managed to buy a few little things, and she bought, where did you buy this little kitchen deal? Sears. Did we have an account there? I think we had an account, and she bought that on credit. We didn't buy things on credit. She had bought a little cardboard kitchen that had to be put together, and it was a little cutie, but didn't cost much. Anyway, we were putting that thing together, and lights flashed through the window of our little trailer, and a car pulled up in front. A knock on the door. I went to the door, and it was a couple from our church, a young couple. Ted and Elaine Posey was their name. He was a truck driver. And he said, I have been driving all night and all day to get home. Time for Christmas. And he said, driving home, he said, I was deadheading. I had no load. Well, he said, God kept, now he had not been to church very much. He was an over-the-road truck driver, and he had been very few times. Now, Elaine came every Sunday, his wife. But he said, God kept telling me to stop and buy a bicycle. And I kept telling him, I don't have any children. And I'm too old and too fat to ride a bicycle. Said, every town I went through, God said, stop and buy a bicycle. I kept telling him, I do not have any children. And finally he said, your pastor does. Your pastor does. So I stopped. Would you go out to the car with me? I went out there. He opened the trunk. Here was this beautiful little red bicycle. And then he pulled out another big package and said, this is something I bought for your daughter. We went in, and next morning we gave him the bicycle and gave her the package. I don't think we even knew what was in the package. And when she opened it up, it was a Chatty Cathy doll. This is 1965. You pull the string and she'd talk to you. The worst and the best Christmas I ever had. And I came very close to quitting ministry because things were not good in my life. And I look back on it now. If I had quit, gone back to welding, I could have probably lived a pretty good life. But I look back, and the lives that have been changed. Amen. There would have been no Central Christian Center. We came to Joplin, first service we had when we took the church. We were appointed to that church. It was an Assemblies of God church, and we were appointed. I went to Springfield, the head office, and I asked them if they had anything, any churches available in the Joplin area. We knew we were supposed to come. Didn't know where we were going. Had no promise of a church. They said there is a church there, but it's been through a lot of trouble. They're in debt, and there's not hardly anybody there. So they said, if you want it, we will appoint you. You will be the pastor. So I went in, first service, there was 35 people, as I recall, counting our family. That was in April or May. When was it? It was in the spring. I think it was April. I had no way of knowing what God had in mind. But people started coming in. And the hippie crowd. I didn't know anything about hippies. And one or two of them came, got saved, and everybody they knew was not saved. So they started inviting them, and they swarmed that church. They'd get saved. And they come in, they didn't know how to dress. They'd never been to church. And some of them came in and they were dressed pretty pitiful. Oh, he had one lady, I'll never forget her. I think she still lives around somewhere. She had on a little short skirt. Well, it wasn't a skirt, it was shorts. And a little halter top that just barely covered anything. And she got saved. That Sunday, she came down the aisle, and I'll never forget, there was a lady there, very wealthy family. She was, they could have bought anything. They had car dealership. They were really wealthy. She always dressed to the teeth and had makeup perfect. When she saw this girl come down to the altar, I looked over, and here was this very wealthy lady with her arm around her. Tears, mascara, makeup running down her face. But they started coming in, and they came in, and by October, we had an old-fashioned day. We didn't call it a muster or roundup day. We called it an old-fashioned day. Our goal was, now we started in April with 35 people, counting our family, and we had a goal of 300. We had 299. I said, if I'd have known we were that close, I'd have gone out and knocked a drunk in the head and drug him in. Then we bought the Fox Theater, and the explosion really went crazy. Byron and Linda Bluck came. A lot of you were there in those early days. Wanda was there. She was just a kid. She was there. How many were there at the Fox at one point or another? Look at the hands. Wow! Wow! How many wish you had been there? There would have been no Central Christian Center. We ran 40 buses. We ran about 3,000 to 5,000 every Sunday. We bring in 1,500 on buses. There would have been no Central Christian Center. There would have been no sheep shed. A lot of lives would not have been touched. Now, some guy told me, well, God would have sent somebody else. I don't believe that. There was no other Samson, no other Jephthah, no other Gideon. God chooses people. He does not attract people to a building. He attracts people to a leader. Someone that they can accept and follow. I don't know why things happen the way they do, but I look back and I think of the lives that were changed, the souls that were saved, because I didn't quit. Amen. Now wait. That is not the point of the story. The point of the story is, what if you quit? You never know what lives have been changed or would be changed. You never know what God has in mind for you. I would encourage you, don't quit. Don't give up on God. Whatever you do, whatever test, whatever trial you go through, He probably has a purpose for it. I don't know how many people have been saved because I've told the bicycle story. I've told it. Most of you've heard it. Some of you've heard it several times. And Lord willing, and I live, I'll probably tell it again.
It never gets old. Never.
Don't quit. Don't give up on God. This is a perfect day to be in God's house. What better day? We have Christmas comes on Sunday every 7 years. Every 7 years. I just want you to know, I sat down by a lady this morning, beautiful lady. She's had some real problems in her life. But she's got them whipped. I put my arm around her and I said, just don't quit.
Amen.
Don't quit. I looked over and tear was running down her cheek. You don't know what your life, what God has in store for you. Just don't quit. Just don't quit. I told her how proud I was of her. She started tears running down her face. Merry Christmas. Thank you for coming. Thank you for letting me be your pastor.